when a rancher saved a starving Apache POW woman. "You're mine now," he said. The last light of the desert day stretched long and low across the clay-built town, soft as a memory that refused to fade. Dust swirled in lazy spirals around Cole Hartman's boots as he rode in, the horse's slow steps echoing the weight he carried inside. He hadn't come here for trouble, he rarely did, but something in the air felt different tonight. Something watchful, something waiting. He loosened the reins and let the horse drift toward the holding pens, drawn by a sound too faint to ignore, almost like a breath someone was trying to hide. He heard it again, thin, brittle, almost swallowed by the wind. A sound a person made only when they'd forgotten what hope felt like. Curiosity tugged at him, gentle but persistent, and he followed it until Sheriff Amos Clay stepped into his path, dust settling at the man's heels. "You're late, Hartman," Amos muttered, but his eyes dragged toward the iron cage behind him, as if daring Cole to look. Cole didn't answer. His attention had already been stolen. Inside the cage, curled in the far corner like a shadow, trying not to exist, sat a woman. Apache. Young. Starved. Every rib showed beneath her dirt-streaked skin. Her long black hair hung in tangled ropes, hiding part of her face, but her eyes were open, fierce even in their weakness. They dared anyone to call her broken. Cole felt something inside him shift, subtle as a breath, yet undeniable. He stepped closer. The girl reacted instantly, pressing back against the cold iron bars. She watched him like a cornered animal, expecting something, bracing for it. Cole didn't know what she'd survived, but he could see the truth in her rigid posture. Whatever men had done to her, they had done enough. The sheriff scoffed. "Wild thing, ain't she? Won't talk, won't eat, hardly drinks. She'll be gone in a day or two if no one buys her." He spit into the dirt, not bothering to hide the cruelty coiled in his tone. "Can't say it'd matter." Cole knelt beside the cage, slow enough that the girl could see every movement. Her eyes tracked him with the precision of someone who had learned the cost of misreading danger. He unhooked the canteen from his belt, the metal cool from the fading day, and held it through the bars. She didn't move. Still, her gaze flicked to the water, then to his face, then back to the water. Cole loosened the cap. "Here," he murmured, his voice low, steady, nothing like the sheriff's rough command. "Drink." She didn't reach for it. Not until her trembling hands finally betrayed how badly her body needed this small mercy. When her fingers brushed his, the contact was fleeting, but it was enough to spark a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Her fingertips were icy, fragile as something newly born. She drank only a sip, as though expecting the kindness to be snatched away. Cole's throat tightened. "Where'd she come from?" he asked. "Caught her in the hills," Amos replied. "Brought her down with the others. Folks get skittish keeping these prisoners alive. Best to sell 'em off, cheap labor, or let 'em die. Either way costs less than carrying." The matter-of-fact way Amos spoke made Cole's jaw clench. Behind him, a few men lounged near the saloon porch, laughing, callous, empty laughter meant to remind the world who held power. One of them pointed toward the cage and jeered. "Ain't worth the rope to hang her." Another chuckled. "Maybe she bites." The girl flinched. Barely. Just a flicker of hurt and humiliation, but Cole saw it. And it was that small movement, more than the bruises, more than the hunger, that finally nudged him from quiet observer to something edged with resolve. "How much?" Cole asked. Amos blinked, then smirked. "For her? Hell, Hartman, she ain't even good for sweeping floors. But if you want yourself a burden," he named a price barely more than the cost of a saddle strap. Cole didn't haggle. He paid it. The sheriff unlocked the cage, the hinges creaking like an old man's bones. The girl didn't move, confusion flickering across her face. Fear shadowed it a moment later, as if she suspected another trap. Cole extended his hand. "Come on," he said softly. "You're free." She didn't understand the word. He could see that, but she understood his tone. Slowly, carefully, she crawled forward, pausing at the edge of the cage, as though crossing that threshold meant stepping into a world she wasn't sure she had permission to enter. When she stood, her legs trembled under her. Cole didn't reach for her, not yet. He waited until she took one unsteady step, then another, and then finally pitched forward, too weak to hold herself upright. Only then did he catch her, arms firm but gentle around her thin frame. Her breath hitched at the contact, startled. But she didn't pull away. He lifted her onto his horse. She weighed almost nothing. As he mounted behind her, her head rested against his chest without intention, her exhaustion claiming the last of her defenses. Her hair smelled of dust and something faintly sweet, like crushed sage. The wind carried the quiet tremor of her exhale, and the sound lingered in his mind longer than it should have. They rode beneath a rising moon, the desert glowing pale and ghost-like around them. Cole held the reins with one hand and kept the other lightly at her waist, not to confine, but to keep her steady. Every so often, she shifted against him, seeking warmth like someone who didn't quite believe in comfort, but needed it anyway. After a long stretch of silence, she whispered something, too soft to catch. He leaned closer. "Nijoni," she repeated, weak but clear this time. Her name. Cole let it settle into him like a slowly blooming understanding. "Nijoni," he echoed, tasting the syllables with careful respect. She closed her eyes, as if hearing her own name spoken gently was a balm she hadn't realized she ached for. He didn't ask more. There would be time for knowing her if she allowed it. For now, she needed shelter, warmth, and a quiet place where no one could reach her. His clay house sat at the edge of the ranch land, lit by a single lantern in the window. A home built for two, occupied by one for far too long. He guided her inside, the cool clay walls holding the day's warmth like old memories tucked close. The little kitchen smelled faintly of stew and sage, the familiar comforts of a quiet life. Cole set her gently on a chair near the hearth, then stirred the stew pot. When he placed a bowl in front of her, she hesitated, watching him instead of the food. Only when he stepped back did she lift the spoon, cautious, as if expecting the meal to be snatched away. She ate slowly, eyes flicking up now and then as though studying him, trying to understand the nature of this man who had pulled her from cage. She noticed his scar, then the one that ran from his jaw to his chin. Her gaze lingered curious, and for a heartbeat he could almost feel her question resting in the air between them. But he wasn't ready to answer that one, not tonight. When she finished, he offered her his late wife's old blanket, soft, worn, carrying the faint scent of cedar. Nijoni touched it with reverence, then met his gaze. Her fingers brushed his hand in a gesture of thanks, light as a whisper, but warm enough to reach deeper places in him. He prepared a bed for her near his own room, piling blankets so she wouldn't shiver. She lay down slowly, curling beneath the warmth, still watching him with those fierce, searching eyes. There was fear in them, yes, but something else too. Something like the tiniest ember of trust. "You're safe here," he said. She frowned slightly, as if the concept was foreign. "Why?" she whispered. Cole opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't know how to explain the instinct that had led him to her. Only that for the first time in years, something inside him felt less hollow. "I'll tell you when I figure it out," he murmured. She blinked, processing his answer. Then her eyes softened, just a little. Outside, a coyote called across the desert. Inside, the lantern light warmed the clay walls, and Nijoni's breathing settled into a steady rhythm, the rhythm of someone who wasn't certain she believed in safety yet, but wanted to. Cole watched her for a long moment before turning down the lamp. Something had begun tonight. Something neither of them had asked for and neither fully understood. But he felt it, quiet as a heartbeat, soft as a promise. And though the night settled heavy around the clay house, there was a sense, just a whisper of one, that the story between them was far from done. The desert morning rose soft and amber, its warmth creeping gently through the clay-walled room where Nijoni slept. She stirred beneath the cedar-scented blanket, her lashes fluttering open, as though waking from a dream she wasn't ready to leave. Cole stood quietly near the hearth, tending the small fire, careful not to startle her. Yet even in her half-sleep she sensed him, her gaze drifting toward him with a mix of caution and something faintly curious, as if she still wasn't sure he was real. He offered a small nod, one meant to soothe rather than command. "Morning," he murmured. She blinked, absorbing the unfamiliar word. But she watched his face, not the fire, as though learning the meaning from the calm in his voice. When he handed her a tin cup of warm water, she held it in both hands, savoring the heat like a fragile treasure. Her fingers brushed his once more, a brief contact that seemed to ripple between them with unexplained softness. Cole looked away first this time, unsettled in a way that didn't feel like fear. After she drank, he set out a small portion of cornbread on the table. Nijoni hesitated before rising, her legs steadier today, but still wary of her own strength. She moved with the delicate precision of someone who expected the world to shift beneath her feet. Cole didn't guide her, only stepped back, letting her choose her own pace. Choice, he suspected, was something she hadn't been granted in a long while. Outside, the desert stretched wide and bright, a silent witness to a new beginning neither of them had agreed to, but now found themselves tangled in. As she ate slow bites, a question rose in Cole's mind, one he'd spent half the night debating. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely. "You got anyone looking for you?" he asked gently. Her chewing stopped. She lowered her gaze. A pause filled the room, heavy, suffocating. And then she whispered a single word so fragile it felt like a wound reopening. "No." Her voice cracked. And in that fractured sound, Cole heard a lifetime of loss, exile, and the kind of loneliness that carved itself into bone. He didn't press further. Whatever story lived behind that one word, she wasn't ready to trust it to anyone. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Still, her eyes lifted a heartbeat later, searching his face, judging the weight of his reaction. He kept his expression soft. "You're safe here," he repeated. Something flickered inside her, doubt, hope, disbelief, all tangled together. She didn't speak again, but she didn't look away either. That was enough. When she finished eating, she touched the edge of the table, as if unsure whether she was allowed to move freely in his home. Cole opened the door and stepped aside, gesturing toward the open land bathed in morning light. "You can come outside if you want. There's room to breathe out there." The invitation hung in the air, gentle yet bold. She followed him out slowly. The ranch opened wide beneath the sky, fences stretching like quiet lines of poetry, horses grazing near the creek, clay structures warm and golden in the sun. Nijoni froze at the threshold, overwhelmed by the freedom that felt too big to belong to her. But Cole stood near, not touching her, simply waiting. Finally, she stepped forward, her bare feet pressed into the warm earth. She inhaled deeply, the first full breath of someone who had lived too long in fear. Cole watched her shoulders loosen, watched her heartbeat steady in the soft morning. Each small movement felt like witnessing a soul return to its body. Then she noticed the horses. One, a chestnut mare named Ruby, lifted her head and walked toward them. Nijoni stiffened instantly, instinctively stepping closer to Cole without realizing it. Her shoulder brushed his arm, the warmth of her so unexpected he almost forgot how to breathe. "She's gentle," he said softly. "Won't hurt you." Ruby nudged Nijoni's hand, and the girl froze. Her fingers trembled, hovering in the air, then slowly settled on the mare's muzzle. The connection was small, fleeting, yet powerful enough to pull a whisper from her lips. Soft. It was the first word she'd spoken without fear. Cole swallowed, struck by how tender her voice could be when not hardened by survival. They spent the morning outside, building a rhythm made of silence and small discoveries. Nijoni followed him as he checked the fences, her steps mirroring his, her eyes cataloging every motion. When he paused to mend a loose post, she kneeled beside him, offering her hands without being asked. Her touch was clumsy at first, her fingers uncertain, but she paid attention, earnest, determined, trying to prove something to herself more than to him. At one point their hands brushed again, and this time neither pulled away. Cole felt the faint tremor in her fingers and the faint answering tremor in his. Later, as they returned to the house, she stopped suddenly. He turned, surprised, then saw what held her still. A man rode toward them. Not a neighbor, not a friend. One of the same men from town, the ones who had laughed at her suffering, who had barked slurs like they were spitting out poison. This one, Hank Barlow, wore a grin sharp enough to cut. Well, I'll be damned, Hank drawled. Didn't think you'd actually take that savage home, Hartman. Cole's whole body changed, shoulders squared, jaw tight, voice low and controlled. Leave. Hank ignored him, eyes fixed on Nijoni with a gaze that crawled across her skin. She flinched back, instinctively placing herself behind Cole's shoulder. Her breath quickened, memories of cages and cruelty rising like ghosts. Look scared, Hank laughed. Wild things always are. Cole stepped forward. Get off my land. Hank leaned from his saddle. You buying her wasn't legal, you know. Some folks in town are saying she belongs back with the rest of the prisoners. Nijoni's hand gripped Cole's sleeve, terrified. Cole's voice dropped to a dangerous hush. She belongs nowhere but here. Hank smirked, turning his horse with a slow, taunting posture. We'll see about that. He rode away, dust trailing behind him like an omen. Nijoni's fingers still clung to Cole's arm, trembling hard. He turned to her gently, placing his hand over hers. He won't touch you, Cole said. Not while I'm breathing. Her dark eyes lifted to his, shimmering with gratitude and fear intertwined. Something inside her cracked open then, something small but vital. She stepped closer, placing her forehead softly against his chest, as if anchoring herself to the one place that had not betrayed her. Cole froze, not in rejection, but in wonder. Her breath warmed his skin through the fabric of his shirt. Her presence, fragile yet seeking, felt like a confession without words. Slowly, carefully, he lifted a hand and rested it against the back of her head. Nijoni, he whispered, you're not alone anymore. She shivered, not from cold, from the slow realization of being protected. That evening, the house glowed with quiet warmth, lamplight soft against the clay walls, shadows swaying like gentle spirits. Nijoni sat near the fire, her legs folded beneath her, watching the flames dance with thoughtful eyes. Cole sat a few feet away, mending a bridle, though his attention flickered more toward her than the leather. When she shifted closer, he felt the warmth of her presence before he saw her face. She touched his wrist lightly, hesitant but intentional. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Her voice was barely a breath. Thank you, Cole. It was the first time she'd said his name. A pulse of something fierce and tender surged through him. He lifted his hand, brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into his touch, eyes half-lidded as though fighting tears. Cole exhaled softly. Slow as dust descending, he leaned forward. She met him halfway. Their lips brushed, featherlight at first, then deeper, growing warmer as the distance between fear and trust dissolved into a single trembling moment. Her hands rose to his shoulders. His fingers gently cupped her jaw. Her breath shivered into his mouth as he kissed her, soft but certain, tasting of hope reborn. When they parted, her forehead rested against his, both breathing quietly, the moment suspended like a secret shared only with the flames. But the desert night was listening, and somewhere in the distance a horse galloped, fast, urgent, carrying trouble toward them. Trouble that would demand courage. Trouble that would test the fragile bond forming between them. Trouble that would force Cole to choose between the law of men and the woman who had finally given him a reason to live again.